these have kind of unofficially became a series on that series of videos on the Half-Life series. Watch me have more true introspection than these supposed analyses. I mean, if I could do 3.5 hour videos on this channel, I probably would. But one of the videos I was watching about, I think it was the one talking about how Breen's not a villain or Breen's the good guy or whatever. Something they were talking about, they were quoting the different voice lines that Breen has, and it made me think of just how like shitty the voice actors can be sometimes. Because he ended up quoting the line that always bothers me in Half-Life 2, particularly because it's right at the fucking beginning of the game, and it's like, how did nobody notice this? But when Breen is talking about, the evolution of the species and this and that, and he talks about, how, they started at the shadows that leapt upon the cavern's wall. And 20 years ago, all of a sudden, 20 years ago, right away, I was like, pretty sure he meant stared at the shadows that leapt upon the cavern's wall, right? But it's like whoever wrote the script made a typo, right? They probably wrote it as like sat read, and then the autocorrect changed it to started, and then the voice actor is just like, not my job, right? And they just read it literally. Like I'll notice that even on YouTube videos where they're clearly reading a script, where they made a typo in the script, but then they read the script literally. Like I noticed shit like that, and I was like, how did nobody notice that? Because it's right at the start of the game. And when he read that line, I was like, fuck, I almost forgot about that shit. Because usually when I play the games nowadays, kind of any of these games that I've played 1,000 times, I'll usually play it with sound off. Usually I'll have music or a video of somebody talking, playing. But it made me think there's another bit like that in a Deus Ex, which I've mentioned a lot recently because I had replayed it like 8 times, a few weeks ago. There's a part that Stanton Dowd is talking about the Illuminati, and he says that they imaged themselves as this or that. And instantly I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure he meant imagined. They imagined themselves as this or that. Like saying that they imaged themselves just doesn't make sense in the context. But it's like, how do these voice actors not see an obvious mistake like that? It's like they truly are like, it's like, the things where somebody fucks up and then, people respond with, you had one job. It's like the voice actors are like, no, literally, I have one job. And it's like they don't even give a fuck if there's a real obvious typo or something like that, in the script that they're reading. Which, by the way, the word typo doesn't necessarily mean spelling error. It could be something like that where it is a word, so to speak, but it's just not the right ones, right? So, for example, started instead of stared, imaged instead of imagined. I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen anyone else on the internet mention that. So, there's some, actual analysis for you. But a lot of these games for me now is just true escapism, and I don't even know if I would really exactly call them nostalgia. I mean, maybe in the truest sense of the word, that almost literally etymologically means past pain, because the alga and nostalgia is just like the alga and like, analgesic, and meaning away from, and then the algesia is the pain part, right? Alga, algesia, whatever. Same thing. Pretty much literally means past pain, although in the context it means something more like yearning. But yeah, maybe in that sense of nostalgia, But I don't really get nostalgia anymore of like looking back at like fondly at shit. I mean, to an extent, but it's just so much more muted than it ever was in the past. And I don't know. Sometimes I wouldn't mind, it being 20 years ago. And that was basically my preoccupation was, day one, finally getting Half-Life 2 unlocked and, just playing start to finish in a single sitting. I even got errors like that back in the day that I've seen in some videos nowadays mentioned, like, for an example, in the older builds of the game, like the retail, that when you first meet Alex, that elevator she opens up, it can bug out and soft lock you there. The elevator never opens. I had that happen back then. Like different shit like that. But I've always liked to really get to know a video game. Like I'll try every way to sequence break, get out of bounds, figure out how they did different, tricks in the game. There's this one guy I was watching. He was talking about some recent video game. It's not even out yet. But he mentioned, oh, look at how this wall breaks. And it's very clearly like the wall piece disappears and the game just spawns in some like wall chunks that fall to the ground. And like I left a comment about that. It's like that's basically every game does it like that. I've done it like that a million times in Half-Life 2, for example. I've made some pretty elaborate levels with different physics simulations and, just lots of shit like that. But I would do it the same way. In fact, you can have an invisible impulse. It's basically an explosion that doesn't make an explosion sound effect or noise, but you can actually check the flags on it specifically to use it for the basis of pushing physics objects. So I could even have the wall break and then have it's like the M explosion or whatever it is entity basically give a little bit of a push to the funk fizz boxes that I switch to being visible and like activate their physics moving. So they kind of push more outward instead of just dropping straight to the ground. Like, there's tons of different stuff you can do. Or like one video, it was like 100 things you didn't know, and he was talking about how some enemies will just kind of like fly towards railings and stuff to like fall over the sides and shit, just to look more interesting. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that entity is called ragdoll magnet because I used to fuck with it a ton back in the day. You put the combine or the metro police on a ledge or something, and when they die, the way that entity works is that anything near it within a certain radius will get pulled towards it, and that's literally exactly what you use it for. And if you decompile the maps or you mess with maps that are, like actually just come, default, like the VMS with the engine, I'm pretty sure the one that it comes with, or if it comes with more than one of them actually is a map that has ragdoll magnets in it. But there's all sorts of different tricks, but I don't know. I just, to my best extent, try to subsume myself with shit like that. It's like the more I can keep myself, distracted with, you know, just making a level in Source Engine or, whatever. The more I can do that, the better. There's actually, I'm about to, well, one of the levels I'm making, I'm about to have to edit the VMTs for some of the railing textures because they're set to alpha blend, and alpha test is preferred since those depth sort correctly. But then also there's a setting you can put in the VMT to make it a two-sided texture. What that means is you could use a cube with like no draw on the top and bottom and just, the railing texture, whatever, around the four sides. And then if it's set to be two-sided, when you look at it in the, the level, you'll be able to see every piece of railing from every side. And so that's a simpler way of pulling off a trick like that instead of having to, essentially make 4 separate brushes that are like a unit thick and texture both sides of it. That's how most of them do it, like even in official maps. But it's just weird that the engine comes with that ability default. You just have to change a very basic option in the VMT, the material file that tells the texture what properties to have. And, I'm probably going to do that. Because, like, at that point, if you wanted a railing around a, like, courtyard or something, you could have the force, you could have the cube, no textured, make it a funk brush so that it's not solid, have the two-sided texture. Now you've got it on all 4 sides, but then, you could just use clip brushes around the perimeter to make it block walkability just like a normal railing would. I don't know, there's all sorts of different stuff, but I just try to keep myself distracted with the creative stuff. And the main reason I've been watching a lot of the rage bait shit, is because, like, being annoyed by them saying some stupid, shit about how they hate fags or whatever, or they put black characters in my video game, or like whatever bullshit, is, being distracted, being slightly annoyed by that is preferable to, having to think about all the psychotic shit I've experienced in life. It's like every waking moment for me is just one, gigantic PTSD flashback. And then I don't usually dream, but I don't even, like dreaming, because if I ever do, it's always fucking nightmares. And yeah, so they're stupid opinions. Being annoyed by that's, unfortunately, the fucking better scenario. This fucking, dusty ass rock in the middle of nowhere. This is such a piece of shit. And just how much everything in my life has been a lie. Like, all these punks are fake. It's like Warren Spector, like I mentioned before, Gabe Newell, Gay Ben, Valvesoft or whatever, being fucking psychotic. And all this shit. Just how fucking empty and meaningless everything ever was. Just always corporate shit, societal shit. But whatever. Not really sure what else to say at this point. But once I'm done recording these, I'm just gonna, go back to messing with that, doing some level design shit. I haven't done it as much as I would have otherwise, for another reason, that I keep getting these fucking crashes that have something to do with the texture browser. For whatever reason, occasionally I'll open the texture browser and that will crash hammer, which is annoying because, as I've mentioned, how much effort I put into texture selection and, this and that. So that can definitely be a pain in the ass and disincentivize me actually doing that shit. But whatever. I mean, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But there's always got to be some, bullshit like that on everything. If I can figure out how to get CSGO branch working without updating, I'm not updating anything. Or some other more modern version of the engine, just to get the better assets and lighting. That's a big thing for me. I might do that, but yeah, that was the thing. The two-sided thing, that was just, the default for alpha textures in Doom 3. But for whatever reason in Source Engine, you have to kind of go out of your way to set that. But yeah, I don't know. There's always these little weird intricacies, you know, with different level editors and whatever. Yeah, whatever. Maybe I didn't say everything I needed to say, but I said whatever I can say. I'm at 15 minutes and, I'm done.